Hey friend, Graham here from recordingrevolution.com, and today I want to talk to you about how to discover your sound if you're an up and coming artist or band. Now, I know from interacting with you for 8+ years now that many of you aren't just engineers, you also are your own musicians. You are recording your own stuff, you're trying to put out songs, you're trying to put out records, you're trying to put out singles, you're trying to tour, you're trying to play shows. And as you evolve as an engineer, which is a lot of what we talk about here, how to record, how to mix, that kind of thing, you're also thinking about the music that you're writing. Because engineering, recording, mixing, mastering, all the technical stuff is really only a means to an end. And that end is promoting and sharing great sounding songs. So you got to have great songs to begin with, which goes back to what kind of songs are you writing and what do they sound like? What is your sound? You've probably got bands or artists that you love that you know they have a distinct sound and they've figured out their sound. How can I figure out my sound? Well, today I thought I would break down what that means, give you 3 simple tips that you can use to help discover your sound, maybe expose 1 or 2 of the myths around this concept of discovering your sound so that you can have some actionable things to think about when you're sitting down to write music and create music and to develop as an artist. The first, let's just start with the myth that everyone has to figure out their own unique sound and it can't sound like anybody else. That's kind of an extreme position. It's kind of an arrogant position that you don't want to sound like anybody else. You want to sound completely original because honestly, you're not original. I'm not original. Your favorite artists aren't original. There are very few people who are original. And even those people aren't truly original because we have all been influenced by someone else. And we borrow and we take, and it all stews in our psyche and it makes us who we are. So the goal shouldn't be to be completely new as if no one has ever heard this before. Although you could probably do that. You could go out and make a whole record based off of just banging cardboard boxes, and that could be your sound. But A, it probably won't sound good, and B, there's probably some weirdo that's actually already done that, so it wouldn't even be original. So before we jump into how to discover your sound, I just want to preface it by saying your goal shouldn't be to sound totally unique and unlike anyone else. Because in doing that, you start from a negative place of, I don't want to sound like them. I don't want to sound like them. I need to be different, as opposed to a positive place, which is, who do I sound like? What do I want to sound like? And while that might sound like semantics, the difference is huge because you can create and discover your sound when you're looking for what you want, as opposed to saying, this is what I'm not. And in other places like business and such, it's important to know who you're not. And I think it is important to know who you're not as an artist, but I think it's more important to know who you are. And so I want to start from a place of discovering your sound as opposed to saying, I want to be unlike all these other artists and be unique. Okay, tip number 1 is real simple. Your sound isn't something you discover once and for all. In fact, it's something you develop. So for example, if you're sitting down to write a record or write just one song, one single you want to release, instead of sitting around and trying to discover what that sound will be before you record anything, you might want to just start with the rough idea of the song and the arrangement and the lyrics and the chord structure and that kind of thing, but start recording it, knowing what the song will flow like and the arrangement will be for the most part, but start recording it with one instrument that you're really big on right now. So it could be very guitar driven if you're really listening to some guitar driven rock. But let's say you discover along the way that you also like this synth sound. Why don't you bring that in? And then maybe you bring in some bass loops, or maybe you bring in a drum loop or something like that. And those things start to build off each other. Even within one song, your sound will and can develop so that at the end of just producing one song, you actually have a sound that you couldn't have sought after from the beginning. It's the hearing of one instrument next to another instrument that can lead you to think, what if I add this instrument? Or what if I take away this instrument? Or what if I sing on top of this? Or what if I add this percussive element? It's reacting to what's before that allows you to develop your sound, even within a single song. Now imagine that over a course of an album. Imagine that over the course of a career as an artist. It is making music, putting something out there, laying down a simple track, bringing in a drum loop, that allows you to start to develop your sound. How are you going to know what your sound is before you start making music? It just doesn't make sense. It's like having an author say, I want to be an author and I want to know what my writing style is and my voice without ever writing anything. To be an author and to develop your own voice, which would be the same thing in our context, develop your own sound, you have to write as an author. You have to write books, and then you begin to discover your voice as an author as you write. The same is true for you as a musician and an artist. You have to record songs, write songs, and release songs to develop your sound as an artist. And this goes back to what I just talked about in my last video, which is there are no excuses for you to not make music and release it this year. So you might as well just start and your sound will develop. Now, the second way you develop your sound is to let yourself intentionally be influenced by other artists. Now, there's this misnomer out there that to be a truly unique and original sounding artist or band, you need to tune out other music so that you won't be influenced by that music and end up copying that music. And I think that's an arrogant, prideful way to view music as well, because all of us, like I said at the beginning, are influenced. That's how we got into music. We heard music that just lit a fire under us and got us into music. You don't go from not hearing any music to being inspired and wanting to make music. So rather than avoiding the influence, one way you develop your sound is to actually intentionally be influenced. You look at artists or bands or records or specific songs that you want to listen to and intentionally try to be influenced from. Now, this is different than copying. Good examples are like Daft Punk, one of the coolest artists in the last 10, 15 years. Their album, Random Access Memories, they specifically wanted to recreate that 70s funk and soul sound on that record. So they specifically listened to records from that era, listened to the arrangements, listened to the instrumentation, and the engineering decisions. What kind of sound did they go for on the kick drum versus like a modern hip hop or modern rock kick drum sound? What kind of sound did they go for on the guitars or the keys or even the cymbals? And they were heavily influenced intentionally because they wanted to kind of recreate that sound. But what came out was a Grammy-winning, completely original sounding record because they do their own weird synth vocoder thing. And it was them. It was them because you're always you, even if you're heavily influenced. Maroon 5 years ago, when they were making a certain record, they were heavily being influenced by Michael Jackson. They would say, I want to listen to nothing but Michael Jackson and let that influence the record that we're making now. These are some of the biggest artists in the world, intentionally being influenced by even bigger artists before them to then create their sound. These are established artists that already had a sound that are still trying to discover and evolve their sound. So I would recommend that you find records that you love, maybe even hone in on one and say, I want this to be my main inspiration for my sound this year. Now that might change next year because our sounds develop, but don't be afraid to be heavily influenced by a record. And I would heavily encourage you to be influenced by older records. Okay, don't just listen to modern music. Although I love a lot of the modern music, part of what can make you develop and sound fresh and sound original is to borrow from decades before. So go a generation before you. So listen to stuff that's 20, 30 years old and be influenced by that. And then blend it with the way you hear music, the way you grew up making music, the way you are growing up making music. Let those come together and mash into this incredible new sound. And the third and final way to discover your sound is so fun, and it's to collaborate with other people. Now, this sounds counterintuitive because you're borrowing and working with someone else that has a different sound, but it's in working together that you can discover something new in yourself. If you're working with an artist or a band or a singer-songwriter that just plays a different instrument than you, or sings differently than you, or listens to different music than you, there can be something in that collaboration that ignites in you something you never would have done before that can become your sound. A great example of that for me recently, and I try to talk about it here, was how I worked with my buddy Ill Factor, who focuses more on electronic music and hip hop. And we collaborated on a song, and I brought my rock influence and my rock vocal influence, and he brought a lot of his dirty synth and his really affected, distorted drum kit sound. And Hearing his music inspired me to make the song go a certain way, and together we developed a new sound that is becoming my sound, at least in this season of my musical journey. Collaboration is a fast and easy way to help you self-discover. It'll unlock stuff in you that you didn't think was there because it's a different external influence. If you just play the same instruments, like I'm a guitar player, all I do is play guitar, play guitar, play guitar. There's only so much that guitar can unlock in me. I can change pedals, I can change amps, I can change guitars and get different sounds, and that helps, but I'm still limited to that finite amount of sounds. If somebody plays a synth pad that I don't play, that can unlock in me new ideas to help me discover my sound further. So collaborate, even with just a friend, even remotely across the internet. Find someone who's different than you and just collaborate on one song and see where it goes. What's interesting about what I've just shared with you is that discovering your sound actually isn't about sitting around and doing stuff by yourself. There's more discovery done in community, and I think that's very interesting. I think that's the way music was meant to be made, is in community, whether it's in a band or whether it's in a circle of influence or whether it's with an audience. In that community, you start to discover your sound more. You get feedback, whether it's instantaneous or from fans, and that's really, really cool. There's also something interesting too, is that discovering your sound is really about being influenced by other people, but it's not the same as copying. And I don't want you to just go copy people. I don't want you to go listen to, let's say, a Blink 182 record from the late 90s and say, oh, I want to do exactly Blink 182 and bring that sound back. I don't want you to do that because that's lazy. Plus, you're not going to do as good of a job as Blink 182. That was their thing. So it won't even be that good or that fulfilling. No matter how good of a cover band you could be, it's not the real thing. So this isn't copying. This is letting music that you love and artists that you collaborate with and sounds that you're layering, it's letting them marinate in you and then blend with the way you are uniquely made, because I really believe that you are uniquely designed and you don't hear music the way anyone else does or the way I do. So we could listen to the same stuff. We could be influenced by the exact same song, down to the exact same song, and still create something totally different. So you're not trying to copy, and you shouldn't try to. But I also don't think you can copy, because I think you will be unique and your sound will be fresh, because it will be a combination of all those things. So as you start making music this year, and you start to make more music this year, make sure that you let your sound develop over time and over the course of even layering instruments or tracks in a song. Don't set out to discover your sound before you make any music. Make music so you discover it on the way. Then be intentionally influenced by certain records or artists, especially older ones, and then collaborate. Now, I want to give you something that's going to help you in your music making journey, especially if you're brand new to this. When you sit down to make a song, it can be overwhelming. You got to write it. You've got to record it. You got to mix it. How does it sound good enough to release? How do I know when it's good enough to release? How can I just get a song that I hear in my head to sound radio ready, right? Something that could sound so good it could be played on the radio. This is a question I get all the time. And so what I've done is boiled all of that down into a simple guide called my 6 Steps to a Radio Ready Song Guide. Every song you've ever heard has to go through this 6-step process. Whether they're doing it quickly, intentionally, unintentionally, every song goes through this process. So what I did was boil it all down into what is step 1, what is step 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you have a map, and then you also have tips and tricks and best practices for each of those steps so that you know how to filter your song idea through all those steps. So you know if you get to the end, it's ready to be shared, it's ready to be released, and it'll sound as good as it possibly can. And I put it all together in a simple, free, downloadable PDF. So it's like something you can have on your phone right in front of you when you're making music, or print it up if you're old school like me and reference it quickly, easily, anytime you're making music. And I want to give it to you absolutely free. All you got to do is go to RadioReadyGuide.com. Okay, RadioReadyGuide.com. I'll put the link here in the video and in the description box. Download it. It's a free PDF. You can read it instantly, and it's going to inspire you, I think, and then be sort of a guide and a framework for you every time you sit down and make music. That'll really help pull it all together. So grab your copy. Thanks for watching this video. Thanks for subscribing to this channel. Thanks for all the support. You guys are amazing. I hope you're making some music this year, and I hope to inspire you to make more music this year. More great content on the way. But for now, download the guide and get cracking. See you on the next video.